Season 8 premiere, When Calls the Heart, Sunday, February 21st. At the end of last season, when Elizabeth thought Nathan was dead, and she turned around and there he was, and she ran into his arms, I thought that he was going to, with season 8, he was going to be reserved because he lost a teammate. I thought he was going to be backing away from Elizabeth, but I was totally wrong. In the opening scene, he just came out and asked Elizabeth for that date that they never made plans for. And there she go again. Let me let you know. Can I answer you later? And he said, I tell you what, just whenever you're ready, let me know. He seems to be more sure of himself. Good for Nathan. Lucas is back. He left town after he saw Elizabeth run into Nathan's arms. He said he was jealous, so he had to leave town to sort out his feelings. She kind of acted happy to see him more than she did about Nathan. I don't know if I need to read anything in about that, but maybe it's because she knew he left town and she's glad to see him in town. But I don't know. I'm on Team Nathan, but hey, whoever she ends up with, great. The newlyweds, Jesse and Clara, are arguing. She didn't wake him up. Where are my socks? They're sleeping in separate rooms because they're not communicating. Little arguments that you have when the honeymoon is over or headed to the direction of being over. Allie's dad came to town. He said he found them by a newspaper article talking about how Nathan almost got killed in the shooting. He tracked them down. Allie's dad tracked them down to blackmail Nathan. He said for $1,000, he or Nathan or Allie will ever have to see him again. Allie's dad seems like a bad guy. Nothing but trouble. Rosemary and Lee showed up back in town from a cruise, and Elizabeth saw them and walked over and greeted them back to town. Faith rode back in town on a horse and buggy with a guy the stagecoach broke down, so she caught a ride. Carson had been looking for her for 5 days. She sent a message when she left, and he hadn't heard from her since, so he was worried. Faith was kind of friendly with her. She was driving the horse and buggy. She rolled up real fast, and they stopped, and her and the guy who owned the buggy, they seemed kind of friendly, and Carson kind of looked jealous to me. She finally said, "Don't you miss me?" Then he said, "Yes, of course," and gave her a hug. As everyone was standing around the stage stop, Allie's dad came around and he started playing with little Jack. And Nathan came up behind him and acted like he had information for him that, he needed to tell him. So they walked away a little distance, and Nathan said, "I'll have the money for you, so he can leave town. He's going to give in to the bribe." But as normal, Elizabeth was back there being nosy. She sees everything. She hears everything. So while they were talking, she was just looking. Nathan walked Allie to school. I guess he was making sure her dad didn't have any communication with her. He told Allie he was going to go to Judge Avery and see about starting adoption proceedings. Allie was excited, and she ran to tell Miss Thornton. And Elizabeth walked up to Nathan and, saying that's good news and everything, and asked him, is everything okay? He said, everything's fine. She said, you don't seem like yourself. He said, he has a lot on his mind. Then she asked him about the stranger this earlier this morning, and he said that he was just someone he's dealt with in the past, and he asked him to move on, so if she sees him, let him know. Nathan was riding his horse, and um, he saw Lucas riding by in his car, and he stared after him. And the next scene was um, Lucas counting out money. So Nathan went to Lucas to borrow the $1,000 to give to his brother-in-law. He really wants to get rid of that man bad if he went to ask Lucas for help. And Lucas said that. He said, you must really need this money if you were to ask me. Basically, he said, you must really need this money if you're going to ask me, if you asking me for help. And he asked him, is that enough? And he said, yes. Rosemary and Elizabeth were walking and talking, and she told her that Lucas came by earlier this morning and told her why he left town, that he was jealous because he saw her run into Nathan's arms. And she said when she ran into Nathan's arms, she realized how much she cared for him. And so Rosemary said, so you still haven't chosen. And then Elizabeth changed the subject and they continued walking. Nathan went to meet Alice's dad. They were in the woods. Nathan rode his horse by, and the guy did a lasso and lassoed Nathan off his horse and picked his pocket for the money and said, you knew you had to bring me this money because you knew I would come back for Allie if you didn't. He took Nathan's hat off his head and said, I always wanted one of these. And he kicked Nathan in the side and got on his horse and rolled out. Nathan's horse came back to him, and they went off to find Allie's dad. When they showed him again, he was in a cabin and he was hiding the money Nathan gave him under the floorboard and under the rug. Nathan called his name, and he went out pointing the gun at Nathan. He said something like, I'm surprised you let me ambush you like that. Nathan said, I had to let you ambush me so I can have a reason to put you away. Allie's dad said, well, you can't win them all. Nathan said, the Mounties, they always get their man. And like 5 or 6 Mounties came from behind the shack, pointing their guns at Allie's dad. Nathan just looked at him with a smirk smile. Nathan was riding back into town, and Elizabeth was sitting on the porch, and she watched him come in. She says, you're back. She said it in a worrying way. And he said, what, you didn't think I would make it back? He asked her, unless you want to go out to dinner with me tonight. And for some reason, it seems like Elizabeth is more nervous talking to Nathan than she is talking to Lucas. Lucas, she just seemed happy to talk to, that he was back or whatever. But with Nathan, she's more nervous, kind of skeptical about saying yes to the date. And she said, well, I don't know if I have a babysitter tonight. For tonight. And he said, well, why don't all 4 of us go? Her, Jack, he, and Allie. And she kind of perked up about that, and she said yes. When he said he was going to go home and get dressed, get changed, get dressed, and she was still looking kind of nervous. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that it's a good thing for Nathan that she's nervous about him. I'm gonna say it's a good thing. Lee took Jesse to the forest and to show him the spot where he and Claire got married. And Lee told him that love is a choice that you choose every day. Choose love. Jesse ran into town with some daisies in hand, and he gave them to Clara, and he said he was sorry. He's been a bear lately. She said, I've not been so easy myself. Claire pulled out the same book that Jesse, when he comes home from work, he just reads the book, Terrifying Tales, and he doesn't want to talk to her. So she just pulled out the same book from a bag. So she said, well, why don't we go home and relax? So I'm guessing he's going to read his copy of the book and she's going to read her copy of the book. And he says, just as long as we're together. Lee and Rosemary came riding up on a double-seated bike, and they said the bike was Clara's and Jesse's. So they got off of it. Clara and Jesse got on it, and they rolled off. Nathan, Allie, Elizabeth, and little Jack were walking down the street in a straight line. Stagecoach came in. Lucas met the stagecoach. A blonde lady came out, and Lucas introduced her to Nathan and Elizabeth and the children too, and he introduced her as Helen Burchard, his mother. Lucas and his mom walked away, and Elizabeth was just standing there, and Nathan called her name because they were going to eat dinner together, all four of them. And then all of a sudden she wasn't feeling well and asked him to walk her home. There goes me thinking that her feeling nervous about Nathan was a good sign, because all she had to do was Lucas to see her walking with Nathan and Allie, and now she wants to go home. So I don't know. She's fickle. She doesn't know what she wants to do. Both men need to move on as far as I'm concerned if she keeps acting like that. Well, that was the ending scene of When Calls the Heart, Season 8, Episode 1. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe.